I've been delaying this um, in hopes that the neighborhood stray cat, who normally comes over early in the morning, would just get it over with because he's a Siamese, so the noisiest of cats. And I thought he'd just come over early. He'd have something to eat, go to sleep, and we could start this. But that doesn't appear to be happening. So I'll wait. If we're lucky, it'll turn into comic hilarity mid-recording, comic gold. We'll see. You'll know when he's at the front door. Trust me. Trust me. Life isn't fair. Justice is blind and dysfunctional. And these cops aren't smart and dedicated like on television. This is who killed Theresa. When I want to get an episode off, sometimes I'll just wing it, as you know, and I like those ones that are unscripted. That you just kind of go with it. They have their own logic. But if I feel something's important, I'll write it down. If I feel it's really important, not only will I write it down in English. I'll publish it in English and in French, and in the interest of time, usually run it through like Google Translate and then just check it for obvious bad grammatical errors and clean it up. When I think something is really, really important, not only will I write it down, I will have it professionally translated into French, which is what I've done with this episode. I think the last time I did that was with the Didery Courbet case, the podcast Noir et Blanc. So that's what I'm doing this time. And reading text, there's an art to it. It can be stiff, but we'll give it a shot. A lot of this, well, all of it today, is kind of in response to something in the book Wish You Were Here. So today's podcast is about my sister's case, Theresa Allore. And it's been a while since we've discussed that. And it requires a bit of background, but I've kind of scripted it in a way that you can kind of follow along. But there are some places where you go, I don't know what the fuck he's talking about. And that's, well, it's, then buy the book, buy Wish You Were Here, and then you'll have the full lay of the land, I think. But in particular, and I'll just kind of read the header and then explain a bit, and then we'll go. 3 weeks after she went missing, Lennoxville Police Chief Leo Hamel managed to connect the disappearance of Theresa Allore with the prior year murder of Louise Camirand. Then came the Journal de Montréal article that quickly put an end to the investigation. And that's traditionally where I'd say, this is who killed Theresa. What I'll say about that. So this is a Journal de Montréal article that sort of came out of the blue. That's discussed in the book, but kind of vaguely. And a lot of the book is written a certain way where you have to make up your own mind with things, and you have to, you have to let your imagination do a lot of work. We did that on purpose. The book is written in a certain way. In some ways, it's traditional. It plays to the traditions of true crime, but we walk a fine line in the book where we also are very critical of true crime, and that's, as I say, that's a difficult walk. And so it could unfold a certain way, but there's certain stops along the way where we deliberately don't go where you think we're going to go. For instance, there isn't a final chapter summation of this is what I think happened. You're supposed to do that work as a reader. But simply that's what I feel is good writing, is that it infects you, and you think about it, and you think about it, and you say, why am I still thinking about this thing? So that was a calculus that was put into it. We were not going to spoon feed people things. But I think this part of it needs a spoonful of sugar to explain exactly what we were getting at with this mysterious article that appeared in a Montreal newspaper midway through, well, not even in the opening chapters of the disappearance of Theresa. And so with that, we're I don't know why I'm so nervous about this. Ridiculous. I'm going to give this a shot. Probably because it's a lot of text. There's a lot here. But it will be a good primer for those. I think we've talked about the case in 2 years. So let's go back to the Eastern Townships of Quebec in 1978 and talk about what was up. Leo Hamel almost got it right. Standing at the shoulder of the road near Austin, Quebec, a police sniffer dog named Rex at his side, combing the underbrush, Hamel was convinced that the answer to a 19-year-old's disappearance lie here in the wooded interior of the Eastern Townships, where 18 months earlier, the naked body of 22-year-old Louise Camirand was found in the snow, strangled with a bootlace around her neck. It was late November. Hamel, dressed in a light windbreaker, knew there was still time to recover the body before the heavy snow arrived and delayed any chance of finding Theresa and a chance at solving the case until the spring. It was also an opportunity for some publicity. Hamel was accompanied by a reporter from Photo Police, a sister paper of the Quebec true crime tabloid Allo Police. The reporter was anxious for Hamel to explain exactly why he was here in Austin, 55 kilometers, approximately an hour's drive from the place where Theresa Allore was last seen in Lennoxville. Hamel's logic was sound. Theresa enjoyed good relationships with friends and family. She was not under any financial stress. After her disappearance, the $1,000 in her bank account remained untouched. A runaway would have surely emptied their bank account. What troubled Hamel the most was that Theresa had a habit of hitchhiking. She had done it the weekend prior to her disappearance to visit friends in Montreal. Hamel then laid out what he called the most plausible hypothesis. Theresa accepted a ride from someone in an automobile, someone, quote, without scruples, a maniac, sexuel, and this person attacked her, killed her, and dumped her body in the woods in the Lennoxville region. In fact, Hamel pointed out that is exactly what had happened to Camirand. Picked up in Sherbrooke, she was raped, murdered, and dumped in a junk heap near Austin. Even more troubling, some hunters had found clothing, matching the description of those Theresa was last seen wearing, a woman's shirt and some pants, the day after she went missing, November 4th, 1978, less than 500 meters from that junk heap near Austin. It was for this reason Hamel had traveled 55 kilometers to the area along Chemin Guerre, bordering Lake Memphremagog. He had pieced this together himself, all within a mere 2 weeks since Theresa was first reported missing on November 10th, 1978. Hamel told photo police reporter François Dowd how he had appealed for assistance from the provincial police, the Sûreté du Québec, who were well-resourced to handle such a complicated investigation. The 45-year-old Hamel was a career law enforcement officer, having served as chief in small Quebec towns of Omerville and Sawyerville. He had barely 9 months under his belt with the 9-man Lennoxville force, and he had never worked a missing persons case. The Sûreté du Québec turned down Hamel's request, saying there was no body, and therefore the case was, up to that point, merely a, quote, simple disappearance. Maybe they were right. The Sûreté du Québec were the experts, with a full squad dedicated to major crimes such as murder. Hamel was just a newly appointed small-town police chief. Still, the snow was coming. A bit about Hamel before we continue. A number of years ago, there was a big TV show done about Theresa's case and the three murders of Camirand and Dubé and Theresa, called W5 in Canada, hour-long program. And, I had it up on YouTube. I've since taken it down. And one day I'll put it back, but not for today, because it's very simple. Why is anybody going to read a book if they can just go look at an hour-long video? So no, I'm not gonna put it up. But the most comments, and maybe I brought this up before, but the most comments that show got were about Hamel, who appears in the show crying, distraught, expressing that he wished more could have been done. And what amateur sleuths conclude is that Leo is hiding something, but more specifically, they conclude something really personally malicious, that he was somehow involved. All from the fact that he's crying what appears to them to be crocodile tears. I never took it that way. I always thought, was he hiding certain things or not expressing certain things? Certainly. But I thought ultimately his behavior revealed that Hamel felt powerless in the face of forces that were well beyond his capabilities as this small town police chief. So François Dowd, the reporter, he publishes this article in Photo Police on Saturday, December 2nd, 1978. So that is less than a month since the disappearance. This great article that articulates very well in French Hamel's theory of a connection between the murder of Allore and Camirand. And more to the point, that the answers are over here in this Austin area. Now, few English-speaking Quebecers would have read that article. Allo Police, Photo Police were highly read in French communities, not so much in English. It was certainly not read by my father, who was unilingual. And I did not become aware of this article until 2017. So that's December 2nd. Before Christmas, the Journal de Montréal comes out and prints a very different article. And the headline reads, in all capital letters, Disappearance mystérieuse, une histoire de drogue. And even a person who only speaks English can decipher what that means. But specifically, the translation is tricky. It can be interpreted a couple of ways. It can be interpreted as mysterious disappearance, a history of a drug addict. So it can be very personal, but it can also mean mysterious disappearance, a drug story. And this article begins, the Lennoxville police chief, Mr. Leo Hamel, wonders if the disappearance of 19-year-old Theresa Allore might not be drug-related, and continues with the assertion that Hamel has doubled his efforts in his investigation, and that has led him to search more, particularly in the current world of drugs, which is very active in the Sherbrooke region. Leo Hamel always denied having ever spoken to the Journal de Montréal for this article, but the negative effects from such an article would have been immediately apparent to everyone, certainly to my family. Robert Bulak, the private investigator hired by my father to independently look into Theresa's disappearance, directly refers to this article in a letter to my father over the Christmas holiday of 1978, stating that Hamel called it, quote, pure fabrication. Nevertheless, whatever the intent of such an article, the results were predictable and immediate. Apart from a typical year-end review summary of crime in the region, which of course would mention Theresa's case, and one French article in February, the English paper, the Sherbrooke Record, and the local French paper, La Tribune, never mentioned Theresa's disappearance again until her body turned up in the snow when it melted in April of 1979. I have long pondered the significance of the Journal de Montréal's Histoire de Drogue article during the 5.5 months that she was missing. It is the only time the Journal de Montréal covered the case. There are no lead-up articles in the month of November 1978 that would introduce readers to the affair, that a young girl had gone missing, etc., etc. There are no follow-up articles after that one publication on December 20th, 1978. So the result was immediate. Readers would have received the message that if the matter was drug-related, then it was a personal affair, something to be resolved by the family, nothing that needed community involvement. And if that was the message, then you have to ask yourself, what exactly was the intention of printing such an article out of the blue? Now, back in the day, the offices of Allo Police, Photo Police, were located directly across the street from the Sûreté du Québec's Montreal main headquarters on Rue Parthenay. And it was said, lore from that time says that if the tabloid, got out of line and ran a story that diverged from the SQ narrative that they wanted published, an officer could simply walk across the street to their offices and tell them they get it right next time, huh? And which notoriously they did this. It's well known that the two organizations sort of walked hand in hand, although with an uneasy separation, journalistic separation. Nevertheless, for the most part, for a period, and to this day, the cops are the heroes, right? Now, in 1978, at the time in this area, the offices of the Journal de Montréal, they're not located across the street. They're located in the north end of Montreal. Near Ahuntsic. Today they're located near the Sûreté du Québec, but at that time they were located near Ahuntsic, about a 30-minute drive from the Sûreté du Québec headquarters. So a little further away than the Allo Police headquarters. My point being, you would have really, really wanted that paper to get the story right? Get it right. And I'll stop pussyfooting around and I'll just get to my point. The Journal de Montréal had no reason to publish the Histoire des Drogues article. Someone planted that story to discredit a missing person. And my guess is that someone was the Sûreté du Québec. The Journal in that era was a tabloid, just like Allo Police. It still is to this day. And unlike the name suggests, it was widely read off the island of Montreal. A story like Histoire de Drogue in a newspaper as powerful as the Journal de Montréal had the power to influence matters. In short, it had the ability to kill an investigation. And that's exactly what it did. If you have pondered in the past why I've been a little hard on the Journal de Montréal, this is why. This is why I've hammered in the past on Archambault Books, the publisher, on Québecor, which owns the Journal de Montréal, on Pierre-Carl Pellido, who specifically owns Québecor. This is why. And they didn't plant the article, I don't believe, but they were complicit in the affair, which killed the investigation into my sister's murder flat. And I'll go even further for the moment with my tinfoil hat theory. When we were looking for a French publisher for Wish You Were Here, one of the first organizations that showed initial interest in the project was L'Addition Homme, a French publishing house owned by Quebecor. So we gave them a advance copy, and they were the first to immediately say they had no interest in publishing it. Which, of course, it goes into great detail about this article. Hey, again, I'll take off my tinfoil hat and say maybe they just hated the book. Okay, that's fine. Even so, why attempt to tamper in the investigation of a missing girl? Would be my next question. If I'm you, listening to this, of what consequence could that be to one of the most powerful police agencies in North America? Whether he gave the interview or not, what if Leo Hamel was right? And by the way, if you think that Hamel's alleged assessment of the whole situation is harsh, the same article quotes my mother as saying at the time that she believed that her daughter is buried in an unknown place. And I never heard my mom say that. In 1979, 78, she wouldn't have told me that, but apparently that's what she said. But back to Hamel. What if Hamel was right? What if this was drug-related? What if this was a drug story, but not in the smear the victim manner that the article implies? And I think in order to understand that, you need to consider what a former law enforcement officer meant when he told me that the eastern townships in that era were wide open. Stated plainly, the lines were blurred between cops and robbers, law enforcement and bad guys. Drugs, as the article states correctly, were prevalent. There was marijuana and hash, acid labs in the bushes and cocaine. There was all of that. And in Lennoxville, in the small town, which was then a small town of Lennoxville, local drug gangs dealt not only at Champlain College and Bishop's University, but at the local high school, Alexander Galt. And if you don't believe that, then I would suggest to you that you were being blindly naive. Just to kind of explain the drug culture back then, low-level gang members would handle the street operation, but everyone would have, be making money off the system. Cops would take a cut and then turn a blind eye to dealers, other criminal activities that weren't overtly egregious at first. And again, if you think it's a bridge too far to suggest that cops would be in on this, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. So where there's drugs, there's prostitution. So now, what if a low-level criminal gets a little too heated around the prostitutes, the girls? What if he beats her? What if he kills her? What if a girl like 18-year-old Carol Fecteau, who ran with local Sherbrooke drug dealers and ended up gang raped, shot, and dumped in the woods in East Hereford near the United States border in the summer of 1978? No one even blinked when Fecteau's murder was unsolved. When unsolved, is unsolved to this day. Because Carol Fecteau was just collateral damage. She was a cost of doing business in the drug trade. And by business, I mean big business for everyone. The police never thoroughly investigated the death of Carol Fecteau because they couldn't. because the moment they arrest the drug dealers responsible, those dealers would probably point a finger back at the police and say they were in on it, taking a cut of drug money. In fact, this is very similar to what happened in the matter of Fernand Laplante, who we've spoken about before. Police knew he didn't murder associates of Carole Facteau, the police informant Raymond Grimard, and his girlfriend Manon Bergeron. And it didn't matter. Everyone needed a fall guy, the criminals and the police. Someone who wouldn't be believed if he tried to break up the system that they put in place, wouldn't be believed in court, as he wasn't. So they choose this stooge, Laplante, and they coerce his accomplice, Johnny Charlin, himself a member at that time of the Gitane biker gang, to testify against him. And just in the words of Laplante's attorney, Jean-Pierre Rancourt, who said to me, it was Jean Charlin and another guy who killed Grimard and Bergeron, not Laplante. Now, stay with me here. Just take this one step further. What if you got a guy, right? Another guy who loses all control and goes rogue. He's no longer just killing fellow gang members. He's now plucking innocent women and girls off the streets, not fellow drug associates. Now it's regular members of the community. That's going too far. But that too is collateral damage. It's a cost of doing business. You don't risk investigating the possibility that Theresa Allore and Louise Camirand were linked to a serial killer because the suspect is someone who is part of your operation. He's a guy that if you arrest him for murder, he will point the finger at his drug partners and law enforcement and confess that they were all in on an elaborate operation to make everyone money. And now that operation has gone terribly, tragically wrong.
So you think I'm a tough kid? Is that what you heard? Well, I'd like to see some action, and it gets into my blood. They call me the trailblazer, riding electric razor. I'm a picture in a chain gang. We don't believe in pain, 'cause we're only as strong. Yes, we're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain.
If you think I'm painting a far-fetched conspiracy theory, let me provide you a stark example from where I live. There's a county here in North Carolina that is one of the poorest, if not the poorest, in the state. I won't name places or names. I don't want to attract attention. We're in my home now. This is where I live. It's known by some as Little Miami because the cocaine that traffics there is cheap and pure. In order to operate anywhere in the drug trade, you need the involvement of law enforcement for protection. As the editor of a local paper put it, it comes down to big business, and my people are expendable. The county sheriff there had been in office for 4 consecutive terms through the 1980s and 1990s. It was alleged he received $300 in protection money for every ounce of cocaine that was sold there. In 1986, his county deputy's son shot and killed a local man in the back in a routine traffic stop. That sheriff was cleared of any wrongdoing. Today, that deputy is the director of a major state law enforcement agency. The father retired in 1993 after serving over 4 decades in state police agencies. The next sheriff wasn't any better because the corruption is systemic and institutionalized. That sheriff was sentenced to 6 years in a federal prison for kidnapping, money laundering, and the burning of houses during drug raids, among other things. A defense lawyer from the area who was scared out of his wits summed it up this way. He thought the sheriff was the problem, that he had drug dealers on his payroll. But that was the tip of the iceberg, and I mean iceberg. What I'm leaving out of this story is that this county is in the throes of an epidemic of missing and murdered women. The neglected cases involve dozens of Native and other marginalized women who have gone missing or been murdered in the county since 1998. Actually, long prior to 1998, but who's counting, right? Certainly not the police. Over the years, North Carolina officials, right up to the governor's office, have been accused of ignoring the crisis. Nothing ever changes. As the newspaper editor explained, drugs are big business and people are expendable. This is what I believe. I believe a Quebec serial offender named Luc Gregoire is responsible for a series of murders, including my sister's murder in the eastern townships of Quebec from 1977 and 1978. Louise Camirand near Austin, Hélène Monast in Chambly, Denise Bazinet in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu, Manon Dubé near North Hatley, and Theresa Allore in Compton. Gregoire would later be convicted of the brutal Calgary 1993 murder of 22-year-old Leilani Silva and is suspected of several other murders in that city. As one criminologist who profiled Gregoire put it to me, it is statistically improbable that a sexual predator like Gregoire didn't commit these murders. So how did someone like Luc Gregoire slip through the cracks of the Quebec justice system? I suspect that initially he would have flown under the radar. Police likely didn't suspect him in the Chambly and Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu murders. Those towns are halfway between Sherbrooke and Montreal. Publicly, they never admitted the death of Manon Dubé was a murder at all. But when Leo Hamel showed up in a roadside field in the Magog region, searching for my sister in the same area where Louise Camirand had been dumped, that must have set off some alarm bells. And to just kind of stitch up something about the Dubé case never being cataloged as a murder. Don't forget that I've talked about this a lot. The coroner's office would have been completely complicit in these matters. Coroner's offices back then were typically stooges and puppets to police forces. We talked about this in the L'Affaire Patineau episode that goes into the history of the coroner's office in Quebec, and certainly the author Jean-Claude Bernheim, when I interviewed him and asked him specifically the question, is it possible for a coroner to lie in the interest of the police? His response was, quote, fully. The coroner at that time in the Eastern Townships region was a guy named Jean-Pierre Rivard, who was a well-known stooge to police interests. And I suspect that Luc Gregoire was one of those low-level criminals in the late 1970s who was caught up in one form or another with petty crimes and in the township's drug trade. His criminal record from the era points to this. Gregoire may have even been the person who murdered Carol Fecteau and participated. Some other guy participated in the assassinations of police informant Raymond Grimard and his girlfriend Manon Bergeron. And if the Grimard gang, and it was a gang heavily involved in the drug trade in the downtown Sherbrooke, Wellington, and King corridor, if they were providing kickbacks to the police, then Gregoire could spell danger for the entire outfit, particularly when he might have gotten out of hand and allegedly started murdering innocent members of the community who were just walking home from school or out buying a liter of milk. There are even suspicions that Luc Gregoire was related to Luc and Normand Gregoire, two career Sûreté de Québec investigators from the area, one of whom, Normand, actually participated in the processing of the crime scene of my sister Theresa. So you wouldn't want to risk that kind of exposure. So when Lennoxville Police Chief Leo Hamel started getting too close to what might have been the truth, you wouldn't ask questions about specifics. You wouldn't want to know the details. Just that something was going down in Sherbrooke, in that area, to jeopardize police operations, and you needed an article planted that would quash any tremors about a serial killer, something that would embarrass the local police chief and discredit the missing girl. So with that issue taken care of, you've still got the problem of what to do with Luc Gregoire. Luckily, by 1979, he was with the armed forces. He was shipped overseas to Germany. But by 1980, he was back in Sherbrooke. And he had now raped a girl in a downtown parking garage named Nicole Couture. So now what? This is now a situation that is, again, on the brink of getting way out of control. So again, you take matters into your own hands. When Luc gets out of jail, you offer him a one-way ticket to Alberta, and you tell him never to show his face again in the Eastern Townships. And as far as we know, Luc Gregoire never did. How big a threat was Luc Gregoire potentially to the Sûreté du Québec? Big enough that when I began sniffing around in the early 2000s and by mid-decade had begun to focus on Gregoire as a potential suspect, I believe the Sûreté du Québec took steps to nullify the situation. 2002, the Sûreté du Québec created their first behavioral analysis division with a focus on solving cold cases. We've been through this. But a little more meat on the bone. They sent agents Marc Lepine and Eric Latour to Quantico, Virginia, to study behavioral profiling with the FBI. Latour eventually became head of the division, and Lepine was anointed the SQ's first geographic profile. Few will miss the irony here that one of the challenges Patricia Pearson and I always faced with the SQ was getting them to understand that the technique of geographic profiling, pioneered by Kim Rosmo, actually existed. Over the years, I have worked with both Lepine and Latour. Both have at one time or the other been my SQ liaisons for my sister's case. Initially, both investigators were very cooperative. Latour was especially very active in pursuing Luc Gregoire as a suspect. He flew to Calgary and met with investigators. He had Gregoire polygraphed. He had an informant placed in Gregoire's cell. But in short order, the eager Latour was replaced with a seasoned veteran who had cut his teeth on Project Wolverine, the task force established to intervene in the Quebec biker war. And when that happened, immediately the flow of Gregoire information for me stopped. In fact, the new guy told me they no longer considered Gregoire as a suspect. This hardliner did once offer me a very good piece of advice, something that I now consider quite unsettling. He told me, "Mr. Allore, as an SQ officer, I advise you to leave this matter behind you. But as a parent, if it were me in your situation, I would be doing exactly the same thing." One of the last things Eric Latour told me was that he had wanted to use a photo of Luc Gregoire alongside a series of other photos of offenders to see if any surviving victims of sexual assault from that era might ID him as their attacker. But, darn, Latour just couldn't find a photo of Gregoire from that era. And my 2008 self accepted this as a believable answer, but my 2020 self says that this was bullshit. I, as a civilian living in the United States, made a request to the Calgary police for an early mugshot of Gregoire just last week. And within 48 hours, I had a response. Did I want the one from 1993 from the Lanny Silva case, or did I want the ones from 1985, the arrests in Saanich and Edmonton, Alberta? Over the years, I have made several visits to that site on Chemin Guillère. Now it's called Chemin du Val, where Louise Camirand's body was found, where Leo Hamel stood with Rex, hoping to find a clue, a connection, something. Each time I invite the Sûreté du Québec to participate and join me. And each time they refuse. Part of me thinks they don't want to lend credibility to a theory that the murders of Camirand and my sister Theresa are connected. And over those years, myself and some very helpful folks who have joined me have recovered numerous personal items, pieces of women's clothing, women's jewelry, a purse, from that forest. The Sûreté du Québec refused to process the items. They refused to even look at photos of the items. And that's a good place to say, if you go to the website, theresaallore.com, TheresaAllore.com for this episode. Some good photos this time around, including the December 2nd, 78 Photo Police article in its entirety, the Histoire des drogues, Journal de Montréal article, the letter from Robert Bulak, sent to my father, in which he says that Leo Hamel says the story in the Journal de Montréal is pure fabrication. But a photo of Luc Gregoire, if you want to finally see what he looks like, and photos of these evidences recovered: necklace, blouse, comb, all items that Sûreté du Québec refuses to even believe exist. And where are they now? Where are those pioneer agents with such a bright future in Quebec, behavioral profiling and murder investigations? Marc Lepine was demoted and thrown out of the cold case unit for reasons unknown. Eric Latour has bounced around a series of SQ podunk outposts, spent a year in Joliette, population of 19,000, best known for housing a women's prison. Spent 5 months currently in Saint-Lin-de-Laurentides, population of 17,000. His career trajectory apparently in opposition to small-town police chief Hamel's back in the day. He's actually going down the ladder. When I interviewed Latour in 2019 for the book Wish You Were Here, after 10 years of losing contact with him, his first question to me was, "How did you get my number?" This just makes me laugh. It's like, Eric, I've been doing this for 20 years. You think I can't? It was pretty easy. He's on LinkedIn. With all his accomplishments, all the brass movements up the law enforcement ladders, right? Chief to chief. You're right there, Eric. How did I get your number? When I asked him to verify some information about my sister's case and Luc Gregoire, his response to me was very familiar. It was virtually the same response Roch Goudreau, who was the original Sûreté du Québec investigating officer into my sister's death, gave to my brother when my brother Andre, reinvestigated matters in the 1990s. Both men said the same thing. They both said, "I may not remember anything." The collective amnesia is astounding. None of these guys keep notebooks. They're law enforcement investigators. Nevertheless, excuse me, I got a tickle. If you want to get rid of a problem, you toss it away from the action. That has always been the SQ way. From reporting in the Quebec daily La Presse, one of Quebec's finest French newspapers, we know of the existence of what are called red files within the Sûreté du Québec. These are usually hush-hush termination agreements with the most senior members of staff, ultra-confidential documents stored in a vault at the top of the agency's other main headquarters in Quebec City, within driving distance of the Assemblée Nationale, which is the highest legislative body in the province of Quebec. This is where the bodies are buried. And conveniently, there's a small shredder inside the small bathroom located next to an industrial shredder next to a vault on that floor at the SQ headquarters.
Moving down the water, John is drifting out of sight. It's only at the turning point that you find out how you fight. In the cold.
In the final paragraph of François Daud's Photo Police article from December 2nd, 1978, the reporter sent an ominous warning to the Sûreté du Québec and the people of Quebec. If Theresa Allore's disappearance one day results in the discovery of her corpse, it is to be expected that the police will then have a lot to do to drag him by the collar and shake hands with the maniac responsible. Moreover, it is a fact that the murders of young girls appear among the most difficult crimes to solve, since the assassins are often people who do not stick out, having a regular job, and not having been involved in any prior judicial process. It should be noted that the weather is a prime factor in this affair, because the next snows could delay the discovery and the solution. Leo Hamel got it right. He got it right.
Hang on, John. We're out of this at last. Something's changed. That's not your face. It's mine.
Special thanks to my friend Micheline for doing the French translation today. If you like the podcast, you can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter at Theresa Allore, at TheresaAllore. That is the Twitter handle for the podcast. I am personally at Justice Guy, at JUSTUSGUY. There's a Facebook page for the podcast. It's called Who Killed Theresa, the podcast. There's a Facebook page for the book Wish You Were Here, simply called Wish You Were Here. There's an Instagram account that I don't use as much. I don't quite get Instagram. But then, you know what? I'm getting old. Of course, the website, TheresaAllore.com. YouTube channel, just search Theresa Allore. It may be under my name, John Allore, I'm not sure. But visual stuff. There's an interview I just posted with Patricia Pearson and I for Wish You Were Here from Shelf Life Books in Calgary. There is recently I jettisoned, gave a lifeboat to the 40 episodes from the first season of Theresa Allore. 40? I did 40 episodes? Out of my fucking mind? My SoundCloud account is going away, so I had to download all those. I'm in the process of deciding what to do with those. They're all private right now. and whether to release them in the new year or to wait into the spring for the US and UK publication of Wish You Were Here. Maybe do it like that, or maybe never release them. I don't know. I'm not. A lot of people are embarrassed about like their initial podcasts. I'm not. I really like them. I listened to the first one. It is, it's not. It is so raw. I mean, it's just, the mic turns on and there you go. And there's no music. And I'm a big one for verite in podcasting to avoid the overproduction. There's certain times where it's gotten a little flamboyant. I think the series on the FLQ was probably the most arty I got with them, with all kinds of oral sculptures and stuff. But in general, I do like to keep it pretty clean and true to just a storytelling narrative. For me, that's what works best. But I don't know. I'm still thinking about what to do with those 40 episodes, I guess is what I'm saying. And the last thing I'll say is, if you like it, or you can listen to other episodes on, I don't know, my platform is Spreaker, but you can listen to it on the website, obviously, but the main platforms are Spotify, iTunes. iTunes seems to be the platform for reviews. I'm not forcing you to give it a great review. I'm suspicious of any podcast who has a straight up 5-star consistencies of reviews. That's obviously, moms, dads, and girlfriends weighing in, or some kind of quid pro quo arrangement. Just give it what you. What I'm saying is I'm very happy with my 4.1 or 3.9. This is just fine. And if you hate it, what the hell? Say you hate it. It's fine. I can't be all things for all people. So hate on, my Cheerios. Hate on. That's it. I'm empty. I'm going to sign off. This has been Who Killed Theresa. I'm your host, John Allore. Have yourselves a great, great day.